Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Real National Dialogue with myself, Jonathan Mokes, and Paul Berkowitz. Paul, how are you in this holiday season?
Well, Jonathan, I'm pretty upbeat, as you can tell by my holiday attire. And I'm speaking to you from a very rainy and gloomy Johannesburg. It's been confirmed that La Nina is having a much wetter summer effect on Joburg, and it's a little bit colder. So for those of us who are still here and are not already on holiday, there's a little bit of cabin fever, I won't lie.
Yeah. Well, I love the shirt as ever, and it does signal a nice holiday mood. So we thought we would close off the year that has been 2025 with a quick reflection on KZN, the motion of no confidence that took place there. Have a look at some of the by-elections that have taken place over the past couple of weeks. There was also the small matter of the ANC's National General Council, which took place last week. And then, of course, just a quick look ahead to 2026. We will be publishing on the Substack a little post on the year that was, so look out for that. And then as we head into next year, we will be kicking off with the year ahead before we move into normal business. And a lot of stuff obviously coming through the pipeline next year, with next year being an election year, local government election. But enough about that for the time being. Let's go to KwaZulu-Natal. So Paul, to set the scene, and I'm sure people have witnessed either with horror or with relief what happened on Monday in KwaZulu-Natal. But the government of provincial unity, obviously a very razor-thin majority for the IFP, ANC, and DA and NFP coalition, which has a kind of well, it's actually a two-seat majority, but if you exclude the speaker, it turns into a one-seat majority. So MK, which is in opposition with the EFF, filed a motion of no confidence in the Premier, Premier Ntuli from the IFP. The motion was eventually heard on Monday, the 15th of December. The EFF actually ended up supporting the motion. The National Freedom Party, which has one member of the provincial legislature and is very much a swing vote, their leader, Ivan Barnes, indicated that the NFP leadership had resolved to support the motion of no confidence, which would have resulted, I think, probably in a tie and a bit of chaos in the legislature. But the actual representative, MEC Shinga, who holds the portfolio of social development, indicated both before and, spoiler alert, during the motion that she would support the government of provincial unity. So, all in all, what happened was that the GPU survived. There was a lot of chaos both outside and inside the legislature on Monday. The MK and EFF had requested a secret ballot, but the speaker overruled them and went for an open vote. Eventually, the government won 40-39, but there was a lot of unruliness. MK members approached the speaker and secretaries of the provincial legislature, and there was a bit of violence in the chamber, which I don't think would have done MK's reputation any good. But yeah, interesting scenes, interesting developments, but the government of provincial unity continues to hold, but tension will escalate. Don't know what you think, Paul, of what you witnessed unfolding on Monday.
I've got a couple of pieces of my mind I would like to dish out, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Firstly, I do not like secret votes and secret ballots. I am glad, just on principle, that this was an open ballot. You will see in the media that MK made a lot of uh, death threats to certain members of the provincial legislature as a justification for calling for a secret ballot. We've spoken about this before when it has come to local government elections. They've even used IEC resources to oversee a secret ballot, and I hate the idea of a secret ballot.
yeah,
And I think and I'll keep harping on this, it goes back to, in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, to the first time that the DA called for a secret ballot
Yeah,
in the motion of no confidence
yeah.
against Jacob Zuma those years ago. Terrible precedent. Do away with the secret ballot. That's my first rant.
Mm,
The other one is, yes, it was a razor thin majority, as you said. Only 79 of the 80 MPLs could vote because the speaker can't vote for themselves.
mm,
And it was going to be 40-39 either way. And there was talk before the vote that MK had been lobbying certain ANC MPLs. And with the secret ballot, the government of provincial unity could have fallen. We don't know.
mm,
We don't know. Another example of MK not having any real power, coming close to a taste of government, but still remaining in opposition.
mm,
And obviously, all of the violence outside of the legislature before the vote is concerning, but it's
mm,
not a new phenomenon.
mm. No, not a new phenomenon at all. I would certainly agree with your sentiments on secret ballots. It would have been fascinating to have seen what the result would have been with a secret ballot, but we'll never know. So I suppose, as they say in the classics, it is what it is. But what I do think is important to take away, and this was something that hurt the EFF in some of its initial stages where it sought to grow, is that South African voters, Paul, don't like violence, don't like the kind of chaos of the likes that we saw both outside and inside the provincial legislature. I know that from tons of research that we've conducted. It was very damaging to the EFF brand. So I think for MK to have been seen and to be associated together with the EFF with that kind of violence is not going to do their brand any good. I think both nationally and potentially also even within the province of KZN. And I think, even though up until this well, recent times, MK's internal situation hasn't seemed to have damaged their by-election prospects, I think it's approaching the stage where the combination of internal chaos, the violence and disruption that they bring, does have the potential to hurt their chances going into the local government election.
Definitely, Jonathan. What's interesting to me is that the DA in the province said they were going to open a criminal case against MK, but not against the EFF.
Mm,
There doesn't seem, as far as I've seen so far, to be any mention in the media of the EFF's involvement in the protest. They may
mm,
have been singing some of the protest songs with MK inside the legislature, but nothing outside, as far as we
yeah.
can see.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I think if you see some of the videos, there were like one or two EFF MPLs or MPPs. I'm not sure if it's MPPs or MPLs in KwaZulu-Natal, but they were involved a little bit in the scuffles. But yeah, I think all in all, unedifying. But the GPU holds for now, and there's no new government in KwaZulu-Natal. Now, let's shift to the by-elections. So, as ever, Paul, very pleased to have you with us to dissect some of these results, and maybe let's. So there were two by-elections contested last night. Not last night, counted last night, contested during the day. We're now speaking to you on Thursday, the 18th of December. But let's maybe go back a week to last week, December the 10th, where we look at two wards that were contested. So I will give a quick recap on the results and then turn to you, Paul, for your thoughts. So there was one by-election contested in Ward 109 in Ekurhuleni, one of the Gauteng metros, and specifically eThekwini, which is very, very much to the east of Ekurhuleni. So the ANC retained that ward, dropping from 69% to 37%. Action SA came in second, 25%, increasing from 4%. the EFF third at 20, relatively sort of little increase from their 16%, and MK coming in with 15%. Uh, yeah, maybe let me pause there rather than us going too far ahead of ourselves, and then we'll come to the other by-election in Theowaterskloof. So, Ekurhuleni, Paul, ANC holds on, but I think a good showing for Action.
Definitely. And you're going to see a general theme, Jonathan, with the Theowaterskloof by-election, as well as this one, and one of the two that was held Wednesday this week, last night for us, that the ANC is hurting. And this is going to have implications, many implications for next year's local government election. We're not going to get into all of them now. Yeah, to go from 69% to 37% is a smacking, and it's incredibly worrying. Just as a hint to things that we'll probably unpack in the new year, when it comes to the point where the ANC in eTwatwa, remember this is just north of Daveyton. This was an ANC stronghold at 70%, and probably even higher before 2021, down to 37%. So you can still win the ward with the opposition splitting the vote. The ANC can still win many wards in the 30s. But what that means when the party is still winning 60, 70, 80% of the wards in the municipality, which means, let's say, if you halve that because of the formula, between 30 and 40% overall, but it's not hitting that 40% threshold on average. It's winning its own wards in the 30s and suddenly doing much worse in the wards that are not its own wards. It doesn't get very many PR seats allocated. And that can have all sorts of implications for council and whether the ANC can actually hold power. A really good showing for Action SA, Jonathan. Growth of 21 percentage points. When the poll, and we didn't talk about turnout, when the turnout falls from 48% in the 2021 local government election to 28%, not a new trend in the metros. It suggests to me that Action SA has actually grown its support and campaigned in this ward organically, which is quite exciting for the party. We know that its best showings in 2021 were in Johannesburg and Tshwane. But so this is a real threat to the ANC. And if you want to take us through what happened in the Western Cape, there are more fronts opening up against the party.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I think as we've been saying, and we'll unpack this in detail in the new year, the metros, it's not looking good for the ANC in the metros. Yeah, so
No.
let's go to the Western Cape, Ward 6, Theowaterskloof, and the town of Villiersdorp. So ANC ward, they again held it, but they dropped from 49% to 33%. The PA came in second at 24%, growing from 6%. The DA came third, dropping from 31 to 20. And then I won't go into the rats and mice. Maybe the other significant party there's the EFF, which got 9%, growing from 5%. Interesting to note, the previous ward councillor for the ANC defected to the Patriotic Alliance, ran for the PA, so obviously grew their vote, but wasn't able to defeat the ANC. And then interesting to note that turnout was actually slightly higher, 46%, than the 40% it was in 2021.
Yes. So what do these two wards have in common, Jonathan? They're both bad for the ANC.
Yeah.
The ANC in both cases is holding on to a ward, getting the mid vote, a share of the vote in the mid-30s in both cases. So there's a fracturing of the vote that still remains a ward seat for the ANC, but overall the party just keeps doing worse and worse. What's different to me is in Ekurhuleni, MK from nowhere in 2021, obviously to 15%, and Action SA up by 21 percentage points. Those are real chunks that the ANC will be missing. In Theowaterskloof, it's better for the PA, definitely, and a little worse for the DA. Trend not so clear because we know that the PA is pouring a lot of resources into by-elections. And it's not clear at this point, and we're going to keep unpacking it in the new year, whether the PA's by-election success has the legs that maybe the MK's general success has had. We'll see.
Yeah. Great. So let's move to yesterday for us. There were two by-elections to close out the by-election year. And the first one in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Umfolozi municipality, Meningi specifically, it was an IFP or is an IFP ward because they managed to retain it. They were facing off against MK and the ANC, and a good result for the IFP. They retained it with 62%, going up from 51. MK came in second at 21%, which I think probably they'll be a bit disappointed by. But and I'm sure you'll talk to this, Paul. A bad night again for the ANC, coming in at 16%, which is a drop from 42% previously.
Yeah, and I think this is very scary for the
Mm,
ANC, Jonathan, because
mm,
you talked about the numbers.
mm,
Between the three parties, the IFP grew. This is the
mm,
second ward in Mfolozi where the IFP, the second by-election, where the IFP's increased its share of the vote. What's interesting for this one and for the next ward we'll talk about in a second in Mkondo, these are the first wards, the first by-elections in the respective municipalities that MK has contested.
mm,
So this is a litmus test. So
mm,
the IFP grew in the second ward in the municipality, even as the MK grew as well. And the loser was the ANC as well. That is interesting. I don't know if that's going to be replicated or how across the rest of the province. But for MK to grow just or almost wholly at the ANC's expense has to be scary, particularly for eThekwini next year.
yeah, absolutely. And quite clearly the ANC's KZN status is not going anywhere and probably is actually getting worse. But maybe
Just for a
yeah,
little,
sorry,
sorry,
go for it.
last bit of
Mm,
context. This is a municipality where the IFP has a razor-thin majority, 18 seats out of 35 since 2021. Just those two by-elections, both cases the IFP successfully retaining. The EFF has got some seats, obviously the ANC as well, but it means that the ANC's power in northern KZN from 2 or 3 cycles ago, having a really strong presence and the help of the NFP, which is a shell of itself. Now it's fighting. The IFP's position may actually be strengthening as the ANC becomes less of an
mm,
opposition party in some
mm,
places.
mm. Profoundly worrying times for them. So maybe a shining light. I mean, the ANC doesn't have much to go on these by-election results. It's retaining wards, but with very reduced amounts. But Ward 14 in Mkondo municipality, the ANC actually gained a ward because it had previously been held by an independent who had won the ward by 45.3% to the ANC's 38%. The ANC got 54% in the by-election yesterday, so that's a growth of 16 points. But MK coming in with 36%, so it was an ANC MK fight. There were some other two parties, AMSA and the EFF. EFF actually coming in last in this particular poll, which I think will be a little bit worrying for them. But MK basically holding their percentage, which we saw emerging in Mpumalanga in 2024, but the ANC gaining award there, Paul.
Yeah, interesting for a couple of reasons, this one, Jonathan. Mkondo, we said before, this is the first ward since 2021 that MK has contested. They only started February last year. I can't believe it's been
I
almost
know.
2 years of MK in politics, but we'll talk more about that on the anniversary. Uh, um, so no experience there before, but we've had 10 by-elections in Mkondo, all ANC wards. ANC defending all of them, increasing its share in some cases, decreasing its share. Nothing really to read in the trend there. All the ANC's wounds in this municipality are self-inflicted. The reason it's had so many by-elections is because of factionalism within the party and councillors being fired and new by-elections. And we've covered some of that. But this is also the southeast corner of Mpumalanga, Jonathan. To the east is Eswatini. To the south is KZN. And this was the corner of Mpumalanga where MK did really well in last
Mm,
year's election.
mm,
And 36% from nothing is big. This is a municipality where the ANC still has a healthy majority, and maybe it will still retain one and continue to fight and not deliver local government delivery things. But yeah, another pound of flesh being torn out of the hide of the party.
yeah. Yeah, so lots to think about as we move into the local government election. I'll save that little bit of what we will be looking at next year for when we talk about the local government election. So staying with the ANC, they held their National General Council last week. It is the biggest meeting that the party holds in between its elective conferences. Important to note that the National General Council is not an elective conference, but it does kind of set the policy direction for the party. But it also has been, uh, let's put it this way, the site of internal mobilization in the past for incumbent presidents to face revolts. Most famously, in the case of Thabo Mbeki, back in when Jacob Zuma was ascendant. And there was lots of talk, Paul, going into this National General Council that number one, would we see the beginning of the end of Cyril Ramaphosa? So there was a lot of talk about potentially whether he would exit, that he'd waited until after the G20 was done, that he was under a lot of pressure and he might seek to bow out or be forced to bow out. There was a lot of conversation also about the GNU. If we take a throwback to the reports that emerged around the whole budget saga earlier this year, that the ANC parliamentary caucus was anti the GNU, that potentially a majority of the ANC NEC was anti the GNU, and that the GNU would face a reckoning at the National General Council. And also there was a lot of thought that there would be quite overt mobilization and campaigning for the ANC succession ahead of 2027. My view is that it was pretty much after all that build-up, it was pretty much a damp squib and quite boring. But I think the ANC will be very, very pleased and satisfied with the NGC. So, it appears that Ramaphosa's position is pretty strong, that there's a recognition that he will be the face of the ANC campaign going into 2026, the local government election, which I think is the only option the ANC has, because he still, from the limited public polling we have seen, he still remains the most favorable ANC leader. So he adds votes to the ANC when they're losing a lot. So he will be the in for the 2026 local government election. I suppose the question then comes, what will his position then be after 2027 when a new ANC president is elected? But that will also depend in part, I suppose, on how the ANC fares in the local government election. But as far as Ramaphosa goes, he's safe for now, and pretty secure for now. There seems to be I would call it more an acceptance rather than support for the GNU. But it was interesting to note some caveats. So there was a real strong determination to push forward with the implementation of NHI, which we know is a sticking point for the DA. There were some elements about land reform, which again is going to be a sticking point. So from a GNU perspective, the ANC still supporting it, but they may push the envelope a little bit next year. And then finally, as far as sort of succession debates and discussions are concerned, it would seem that it was probably a very good NGC for Fikile Mbalula. So apparently he received quite a standing ovation in response to his organizational report, which was introspective, pretty blunt, but pretty, I suppose, spot on in terms of its analysis. And he got a bit of momentum for his upcoming battle with Mashatile, or whether he's even positioning for deputy presidency. So those are basically my takeaways. But Paul, what do you think of what came out of it and the general state of the ANC post NGC going into next year?
I think your analysis is spot on, Jonathan, which is a shorthand way of saying of being lazy and not giving too much input. So, so let me think about it. Agreed. I think that Ramaphosa and Balula were under a lot more pressure, let's say 4 or 5 months ago, when we were talking, no, let's say 6, 7 months ago in the thick of the GNU mess over the budget in its various versions and incantations, yeah, because it is a bit of a spell that everyone was under.
Absolutely.
Uh, yeah, so good for them. It does give me a feeling that yes, I think you used the word tired. That if Ramaphosa's opponents within the party are tired, they're disorganized. The SACP is a little confused because it's done very badly in by-elections recently. Leadership is divided on whether to stay or whether to go next year as well. So the momentum with Ramaphosa and everyone close to him, and we know Mbalula's got he's got a knack and he's had it for years, over a decade, of being close to whoever is the popular, and his star is rising. Um, NHI definitely going to be a sticking point for the DA, and got me thinking that if anything could, if not bring down, but be used as an excuse to precipitate a breakaway ahead of next year's election, it could be the NHI in terms of voting for it and its implementation. At the moment, I agree, things look good. The waters are calm. Everyone is anxious to be on holiday and not fight anymore until the new year. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know, we've spoken before, Jonathan, that recent polls and not so recent polls have shown that there is no alternative to Ramaphosa. Uh, Mashatile, other ANC leaders are not well liked. Favorability scores are low. I also think, as a final thought, I wonder how much Ramaphosa, Balula, and the camp have been managing expectations within the party about what to expect in next year's election, maybe to control the fallout, maybe to get the opponents to mollify them or to take the sting out of anyone saying this wasn't a big surprise. It's not a great election strategy, but it probably works for internal party politics.
Yeah, absolutely. And their sort of override, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think their overriding imperative next year is to manage the internal fallout that comes from an inevitable bad result. I mean, unless things change miraculously, and never say never, but it's unlikely, the ANC is going to get one heck of a smack in next year's municipal election. And maybe that's a good segue, Paul, into just having a quick look ahead at 2026. We're not going to belabor the point because we've got a lot to write about and a lot to talk about as we kick off next year. And there's a lot of, I think, exciting projects coming from the South Africa brief, which will hopefully also spark conversation. But for me, I think the three immediate things come to mind when you think about 2026. You've covered one of them. That's the state of the government of national unity. There's a lot of people that started 2025 wondering or thinking that the GNU wouldn't survive. And I think there were moments, particularly with Budget 1.0 and Budget 2.0, where it looked like the GNU was imminently going to collapse, but it held. And I think for the foreseeable future, in the first quarter of 2026 looks relatively safe, but there are some moments of danger, which, as you've mentioned, would be the NHI. But of course, there is a budget coming up in late
Yeah.
February, so the
Don't
whole
take the
cycle
budget for
continues
granted
again.
ever again. Yeah.
No, no, that's the one lesson we've learned. But I think the response and the agreement around the medium-term budget policy statement probably foreshadows consensus. But NHI, land reform, other things that come up are going to be sticking points, and the DA will have at the back of its mind trying to maximize its votes on the local government election. Let's leave the local government election for last. I think one thing that's going to happen next year that maybe tends to not be spoken about nearly as much as the ANC is the DA Congress. So there's a
Mm.
DA Congress that's taking place in April, I believe, and listeners and viewers will have been reading and watching the pretty intense and bitter fallout that has ensued in the DA after the removal of Deon George as the Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. I always get that ministry's name wrong, but I think people know what I'm talking about. He was replaced by the president at John Steenhuisen's request by Willie Oukamp, and there was basically a briefing battle where George was accused of poor performance and malpractice and some let's say unpleasant behavior in the ministry. Those were allegations that were put in the press. Then there were also allegations that George had been dismissed because he had cancelled John Steenhuisen's use of the DA credit card. And then, of course, that came out on top of news that there'd been a default judgment by the Cape Town Magistrates Court on John Steenhuisen for an unpaid credit card debt, personal credit card debt of 150,000 Rand. What also has transpired is the federal executive have referred the dispute between Steenhuisen and George to the party's Federal Legal Commission, and also effectively kind of put a gag order on them. But it does seem that there are knives out for Steenhuisen, that there's a bit of unpleasantness brewing within the DA ahead of the Federal Congress, which takes place, as I mentioned, in April. It's unclear as to the extent of that. There is a grouping in the DA, as there is in the ANC, that are anti the GNU. So there's a particular play against that. And then there's been a lot of attention put on whether Jordan Hill-Lewis, the mayor of Cape Town and the favoured successor, according to the public and many within the DA, will stand. Jordan Hill-Lewis maintains that he won't stand against Steenhuisen if Steenhuisen puts himself forward, but has not really has avoided commenting whether he will stand if Steenhuisen declines to put himself forward for another term. So, Paul, I think that is fascinating and could have quite significant implications for the GNU and also for the DA. I think the last thing the DA needs after, let's face it, a pretty good year for them, is to be hampered by internal fighting for their Congress.
Yeah, it could be a nightmare. And Jonathan, if they can keep it under wraps until 2027, that's one thing. But again, I come to you with tears in my eyes as a long-suffering Johannesburg resident. Just have to sneak this in. But on a serious note, it could have profound implications for coalition politics and local government post next year's election. All right. We know. And again, a bugbear of mine, something I want to rant about in the new year, but I'll keep it short here. We've seen DA-led coalitions collapse in Johannesburg at least twice and in other metros around the country. And that's been because of decisions taken at the federal executive level. These are not coalitions that collapsed because, like some other models that parties have been looking into overseas, decisions made, governments formed at local government level were allowed to be free of any interference and party politics further up the sphere of government, which I'm personally a fan of. I'm just throwing a bit of shade before the end of the year. We'll get more into it in the next year. I worry that this could be another thing, that this could be possibly the DA snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Again, in my opinion, when it comes to local government coalitions and whether the party is stable and the right group the right group is in charge at FedEx to make the decision whether a coalition in a metro should live or die.
Yeah.
And that's my rant, and that's my way to make it about us, well, in Joburg, but local
Yeah.
government.
And by the right people being in charge at FedEx, we're not, of course, referring to the courier company. That is the DA's federal executive. Sorry, that is a terrible dad joke to end the year on. Um,
Love them.
but I think the other point as well is that Helen Zille is the mayoral candidate for Johannesburg. There was much fanfare, much momentum. It's essentially hers to lose. The last thing she needs to be doing, because she's also currently the chairperson of the Federal Council, is dealing with internal fallout and managing federal executive and federal Congress issues when she should be campaigning and building on her momentum. So I think that's another thing to watch about how she manages her time as the build up to the DA Federal Congress ensues. I really think it's just such terrible scheduling. Why have a Federal Congress 6 months before a local government election? It's just really not ideal. But yeah, that's obviously not for us to decide on or think about. But it just seems mad to me.
It's going to be a very interesting year, Jonathan.
Yeah. So the final thing, and this is really where we probably wrap up the podcast, but look ahead to next year. I mean, without question, and it's what we constantly have been talking about in our analysis. The big thing that happens next year is the local government election. So theoretically, it could take place in early 2027, but all indications and mutterings and sounds from the IEC, from government, are that it'll take place in early November.
Yeah.
So I think we can anticipate that the municipal election will be in early November. It is going to be, without a doubt, maybe other than what may happen to the Government of National Unity, the big political story of next year, the big focus of next year. And yeah, it could be a monumental moment in the further evolution of South African politics. As we've already discussed in this podcast, Paul, the ANC are likely to implode in the metros, but I think also struggle throughout the majority of areas in the country. I think the DA, if it can put a lid on internal issues, stands to gain an incredible amount, particularly in the metros. But the DA is equally vulnerable, as is the ANC in the rural part of the Western Cape. So I think the PA will be a party to watch in the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, and maybe certain areas of Gauteng. MK has the potential to sort of decimate the ANC in KwaZulu Natal, but it also has the potential to pick up, as you've spoken about, in Mpumalanga. And then, of course, I think the other party to watch, because they've had a real late surge in 2025, is Action SA. And if they can focus on their strategy, it seems to be a new strategy of townships and some of the more peri-urban municipalities, I think they have the potential to do quite well. But as the saying goes, a week is a long time in politics. 11 months is a long time in politics. There's a lot of campaigning politics to happen between then and now. But it's exciting, isn't it, Paul?
Well, Jonathan, if you think covering 18 parties in the National Assembly has been difficult over the last year, we are going to see new parties and new breakaways and new formations that we can't even consider yet, that aren't on the radar. It's going to be a very long 11 months. But we will be here to unpack it all.
Yeah, no, we will be every step of the way. And I think on that note, thank you to all our readers of the Substack, to our listeners, to those who've endured our dulcet tones on the podcast. Thank you very, very much. Please continue to share and spread the word. We are very excited about what we've got planned for 2026. As mentioned earlier on, we will kick off the year in probably mid-January with a year ahead piece on Substack. Follow that up with an initial podcast. We've got some exciting guests lined up for next year, so it all looks very good. So I think it remains for me to say, Paul, to you and to our listeners, have a very happy holiday season. Be safe, get some rest, and we'll kick it off all again in January.
Yeah, echoing that, thank you for your support, for your engagement, for listening to us, for reading us. We have some exciting surprises for the new year, which we'll unveil in due course. And please remain happy and healthy and safe until we meet again.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.